Let's be honest. Most of us were taught algebra, little world history, and how to parallel park. But no one ever sat us down and taught us how to communicate when we're exhausted, overstimulated, under pressure, and still expected to love well.
Especially not in midlife when you're juggling careers, caregiving, identity, shifts around health, and changes and decades of shared history. The
Hmm.
stakes are higher, the patience is lower, and the cortisol, oh man, it's active.
Today's guest understands what happens in those moments, not just spiritually, but clinically. Shundria Riddick is a licensed professional counselor, a national speaker, author, and someone who walks alongside people through their most difficult seasons with both professional expertise and a message of grace and hope.
We're talking about what we never learned, how to communicate under stress, how to name needs. We don't even have language for, and how emotional intelligence must evolve if long term love is going to thrive. You found the Midlife Revolution Unleashed, the space to embrace your wisdom, reignite your passions, and move boldly into what's next. I am Coach Wayne, the VIP coach.
And I'm Coach Stacey M. Lewis. We're here with insights, stories, and strategies to fuel your midlife journey. So take a breath, lean in. Your revolution starts now.
Hey, Stace, what up?
Coach Wayne, what's going on, my friend? What's going on? Look at this beautiful guest that we have today.
Thank y'all for having me. This is so great. I'm
So,
so honored to be here. I'm so excited
oh,
about tonight's conversation. So
we are
excited.
excited to have you.
Yes.
Today we're going to be unpacking the real mechanics of communication in midlife relationships, not surface level stuff, but the skills, regulation, and maturity required to love well. And
Mm.
when life is full and pressure is high, we want to catch the communication strategies. So, Shundria, from a clinical, well, first of all, welcome to Midlife Revolution
Thank
Unleashed.
you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here, y'all. I am very grateful that I'm here with y'all to have this wonderful conversation, and it is needed. And I'm ready because we have a lot.
Yeah. So we're ready to jump right in. Are you ready?
Yes. Go.
Okay. Well, let's let the folks know. So tonight we want to talk about, and wherever you're listening to it, whether you're catching the replay or not, we want to welcome you all to Midlife Revolution Unleashed. And our guest tonight is an expert in communications, and so we're going to kick off. Chandra, what happens in terms of our mechanics and body when communication breaks down?
Man, that's a great question because I think what we dismiss a lot of the times is one, we have not learned how to communicate effectively, especially in relationships. No one ever sits us down and says, this is what you're supposed to say, and this is how you're supposed to feel. We learn most of that as we are growing up. So we are wired in a way because of the communication in our homes, what was expected of us or not. And a lot of us are Gen X, late, boomers and Gen X and probably some older millennials. We grow up in homes where we're wired before we're rational. Like we learn communication a certain way. And because our body responds in a certain way, we assume that that's what's supposed to happen, right? So if I feel fear, I'm supposed to retaliate. Or some of us, if we feel fear, we're supposed to dismiss that
Mhm.
feeling and power. So a lot of us aren't aware that we are still living by those same communication skills. If we've never done anything differently, if we've never learned anything or attempted to um, address those uncomfortable feelings we have inside of us, we're still using those same behaviors. They've never changed since like 5 or 6. They never change.
Well, and how do they show up now that we're no longer 5 or 6? How do they show up in our current relationships and in particular our love relationships?
Well, a lot of times it's normally through conflict. Something happens and they have a conflict, and then over a long period of time, the relationship starts to kind of drift. People start to drift apart. Some people cower. Some people hold on to their anger. Some people have this form of resentment throughout and decide, I'm not going to really say anything. I'm just going to shut down because what I say doesn't matter anyway. So eventually communication breaks down, and then the relationship starts to become real distant over the course of time.
Yeah. Biologically, are we seeing any shift in terms of chemicals or, hormones? What's happening in that area?
Yeah, especially with women, the perimenopause and menopause, a whole lot of physical changes are happening. And a lot of us were not taught that those things were happening. So you may see a lot of irritability, anger, frustration, depression, crying, panic attacks, just this whole form of like slow anger. I mean, not slow anger, but hard to move around, hard to think, foggy thinking, things like that. Our body change as far as even having sex. It's painful, or there's a lack of desire. So if we're not knowing all those things that are happening, they really are impacting our relationship. And men, as they get older, most men have ED, erectile dysfunction, or other issues, heart problems, diabetes, high blood pressure. All of that affects how we feel inside and how we attach and communicate to our partners. And if we're not aware of all those things, then it can cause so many problems, so much distance in relationships.
Yeah, it's so interesting in listening to you, just thinking about how it all results in breakdown,
Yeah.
right? It's breakdown in it sounds like breakdown in how you feel about yourself and breakdown in how that gets communicated or how you then communicate with your partner.
Yeah. So there's this theory that is called social exchange theory. And in the social exchange theory, um, there's an exchange. I'm doing things because I benefit. There's a benefit from the things that I'm doing, right? So as long as I'm getting a benefit, I'll get. It's called cost analysis, right? If there's a cost, that's fine. But as long as I'm getting something in return, right? And so most of us, unfortunately, that's all we do. As long as I'm having something in return, I'm good, right? So once this place in our lives, in this midlife, that may not always be an even exchange. And so when that's not an even exchange, it leaves some people feeling alone and isolated and not thought of or dismissed or not cared for, not loved, there's no attention to me. You don't care about me. So it just breaks down the communication, breaks down that relationship. And eventually, we don't know how we got here. We were married for however many years, and now we really don't even enjoy each other's presence or each other's company because we're not aware of what's happening around us.
So you're saying that we bring a transactional end to our relationships.
Absolutely.
It's what do you do for me lately kind of thing,
Absolutely.
And if we feel like there is a tipping in the scale, like we've done, and there's a expectation that you should have done more, or equated what I'm given, if that's not happening, we tend to have a gap sometimes that results in our shutdown or the quiet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I often like when couples are continuing to argue. Sometimes that means I still care. I want to work things out. Once they become quiet, is,
Mm.
is that withdrawal of affection, that withdrawal of emotion, and they start to exit the relationship. So yeah, there's a breakdown, and some people feel like they're giving more than they're getting. So it's just hard to kind of explain that to people who have never really been taught that sometimes there's a sacrifice. Sometimes you do give more than what you get, but that's a hard lesson when you're talking to the person who feels like they haven't have gotten anything from their relationships.
Do you think that we recognize that we haven't been taught, or are we just so programmed, so to speak, right? So entrenched in a way of behavior and a way of thinking that it feels normal, like this is what it's supposed to be.
No, I don't think we ever think that we haven't been taught. We say, this is what I've heard, or this is what I've heard at church, or this is what my mom did, this is what my dad did. Some of us try to do the opposite of what our parents did. As long as I'm not doing what they did, then it must be the right way, right? And that doesn't mean that it's the right way just because it's the complete opposite. So most of us go in thinking, I'm going to do better. I'm going to love my wife. I'm going to love my husband the way I'm supposed to do, the way I've heard at church or friends or on television, or we grew up in the era of Oprah, right? So Oprah had all the answers, right? And so as long as we're looking at Oprah or Dr. Phil or whoever else was on television giving it relationship advice, we thought, oh, okay, I'm doing it right, or I've learned something new today, I'll try that. But did not take studying our partners seriously, running after them, trying to get wisdom about how they are and learn them. Most of us don't do that. So, we do learn things, but we've never been taught to pursue the other person as far as understanding.
Yeah. Clinically, there is this theory that around attachment. And so a lot of what we learn, it is said, we get it from our early caregivers.
Yes.
Can you speak to that in terms of the gender differences?
Oh, man. There's like these stereotypes we get when we were growing up, right? So little girls are all pretty and you have to be clean, nice and neat. And boys are dirty and hard. And right, girls are really quiet. Boys can be kind of loud and rough and don't cry. You're a man, hold it up. And so even though those were things taught to us in our childhood, we take those things to heart. And so we grow up like that. And so in adults, what we've been taught in childhood, as far as especially women, Black women in particularly, you don't really cry. You're strong. If you cry is like, you can cry, but by yourself, but you have to come out and strong. What is a Black woman's motto? We do what needs to get done. That's what I was taught. You do what you need to get done. That's it. No question. Right. So you don't complain, you kind of hold that thing in. Black men are taught, don't cry. Don't show emotions, right? And emotional intuitiveness is not a priority, in teaching Black men, right? So all of that culminates. We all walk in and we bond together and we walk down the aisle, expecting for there to be some sense of peace and connection and health, when we have all these ideals, all these things that we've been taught growing up and in our childhood and media, how we're supposed to be, and it's a disaster.
Yeah. Black men are taught that we are supposed to provide, yes, we protect, we produce, but we're not taught how to process.
Absolutely. Yeah, that emotional intelligence is really important. There's emotional intelligence and there's emotional quotient. Emotional intelligence says, I know I can communicate how I feel. I can tell you how I feel. Emotional quotient, which is a part of emotional intelligence, says, I can discern how you feel. And I can sit here and try to assess what you're feeling in relationship with me. I know what it's like to be me. I don't know what it's like to be in relationship with me. So if someone tells me how it feels to be on the other side of me, I need to listen. But many of us can tell how we feel. But many of us shut off when it's time to evaluate or discern what the other person's experience are of us in relationships. So we're not taught that at all.
Wow, that was so good. And let's talk a little bit about naming the unnamed, right? Often couples, I'm sure in general, but certainly as we get to a certain age in life, are not necessarily fighting about the dishes, but they're fighting about the unmet needs that they don't really have the language for. So share any thoughts you have about why naming your needs could be so hard for adults in particular.
I think because we don't know how to name them. I think we just know the core ones. We know sad, we know angry, We know frustrated, hungry. We really don't know. We've never gone deeper to identify, I'm disappointed, or I'm intimidated, or I'm unsure, or I'm a little, insecure right now. I don't know. I'm lost. I don't have any words to say. We don't really have anything outside of those basic things. So we really do have to learn the language around feelings, right? I have clients, I have this feeling wheel, and it's emotion wheel, and I just hold up there, say, pick one. And they can pick one in a little circle. They say sad. I say, we said sad. And then all along the sad in that particular perspective, in that spectrum, there's a whole lot of different words for sad. And one of them is disappointed. I'm disappointed. I had expectations that weren't met. So I'm disappointed. And so, yeah, a lot of us don't know how to label them.
Yeah. And especially when it comes to men, we oftentimes choose anger as one of the quick responses to how we feel. And sometimes anger is really about frustration or even fear.
Yeah.
Because sometimes the idea of being vulnerable is for a lot of men a sign of weakness, and asking for help, to just say, hey, at this moment, I need your presence because I'm feeling overwhelmed. It sounds a little sissy for a lot of men. It's easier to say, when you're not around, it makes me get angry.
Yeah. There are two key issues, key things that we need in relationship, and that's vulnerability and intimacy. And that's what Jesus did on the cross. He was vulnerable, and it was intimacy. That's the only way we can have relationships. And he demonstrated that by going to the cross. And so those are the key elements we need in marriage. Husbands, love your wife like Christ loved the church, who gave himself. Right? And so in that relationship, there needs to be vulnerability and intimacy. Unfortunately, vulnerability is viewed as weakness. That means there's a risk, right? I have to show my inconsistencies. I have to show my weaknesses. And intimacy, I have to be naked. You have to know all of my weaknesses. But that's the trick of the enemy. He understands that if we do that, he can't break the bond. You can't penetrate it, right? And so I do have big burly men as clients, big burly man. I mean the man's man, you know what I mean? They are men, wonderful men who decided to come to counseling for whatever reason. They decided to participate, and they come every single week. They were very skeptical initially, but they come every single week. And one thing I always get them to say is, once I get them to name a sadness, or disappointment in their parents, or disappointment that their dad wasn't there, or disappointment how their mom treated them, or some teacher or some coach. When I get them to name that, it disarms them. One incident, and they realize, oh, this vulnerability thing, I won't get hurt. Like, it's safe to identify that. And just that one admission, it starts to break down walls all over. And they become far more acceptable into these emotional discussions. And they admit, you know what? I was wrong. You're right. I was not doing that. And they realize that vulnerability and intimacy is creating a much better relationship with their spouses at home.
Yeah. Part of it, I think, is the entraining of both parties, that you can put a new meaning to an incident. And so in the past, we may have seen from our early caregivers a particular behavior, and we attached a certain meaning to that. And oftentimes, for parents, especially midlifers, they didn't come with the blueprint. So they kind of had to figure it out along the way and did the best they could. That's part of the understanding for forgiveness, first of all, to be able to let go and move on, and to know that something else is possible in the way you're going to rear your own family. And it's helping them to also put a new meaning to some of the things that traditionally we've been told by the media, by Hollywood, by friends, family. That's just not useful to us today.
It is not, and it is ruining a lot of relationships, parent-child relationships. Vulnerability is the key to good, strong relationships. If I can be vulnerable with you and feel safe, it means I can love you wholly and completely. If I'm not vulnerable, if I don't feel safe, then I'm always hesitant to extend my complete self in the relationship. I won't do it, because if I don't feel safe, then I won't lay all those things out for you. Right. And no, we weren't taught that. We were taught how to respond. My mom used to say, speak when you spoke. I didn't ask you. I'm not asking your opinion. Right. Do what I say. I don't care.
Mhm.
Right. And so there was no expectation that there was an experience on the other side. There was an experience being 10 and being told that. Right.
Right.
But we grew up in a time where all the psychology things weren't readily accessible. We didn't know, right? But we didn't know that we weren't learning emotional intelligence. We didn't know we weren't learning how we felt. We just knew that we're supposed to respond to how that person felt. If they feel angry, we respond a certain way, right? There was nothing about vulnerability and I'm sad or that hurt my feelings, right? It was nothing like that. So we do grow up, unfortunately, with some of those same rules. If I feel that way, then it must be true. It must be true if I feel that way.
So good. Listening to and thinking about vulnerability. Often when Wayne and I host shows, we offer as coaches some coaching questions, but having your expertise here is really a unique opportunity. And so when it comes to vulnerability, what, if any, kind of questions might you share that our listener might begin to ponder as they think about, are there times that I have been shielding and not been vulnerable, or is my vulnerability stepping in the way? But those are my questions. But what do
Yeah.
you think? What
I
questions
think
might
you
you?
have to ask yourself, do I have one response? Mainly, if I just get angry or frustrated about everything, if it's
Mm,
something I don't like, if I'm always frustrated or angry, there's something else going on, right? Or if I don't address it at all, if I just say, okay, whatever, that's fine. If I just shut down, there's something else you're feeling. And being able to identify those feelings and question yourself. You don't even have to do it with your mate or your spouse. You can say, why am I always angry? What is going on? What is that internal dialogue that's happening within me that I can't reach out to my wife, or I can't reach out to my husband, or I can't reach out to my children for that matter, right? What is it about me that keeps me enclosed within myself? Why is the common experience of me anger? Why most people in my life say I'm hard to reach, or most people in my life avoid me, or most people in my life just make sure I'm happy and walk away, right? Those are the questions, because I think trying to figure yourself out within yourself, it's hard without asking those questions, because you're just used to you. It's
mm,
normal to do it that way, right? So if you say, hey, people are telling me that, or I do notice that I'm always angry, I need to start, why am I always angry? Why am I frustrated?
Yeah,
Yeah.
you speak of the power of asking poignant questions. And oftentimes, one of the things that happen is we don't ask ourselves those questions you ask,
Right.
because we're always asking questions, even if it's to ourselves in a little corner. And so
Mhm.
part of the work that you do, obviously, is helping people to ask these questions, provoking questions, profound questions, so that they can go deeper. And,
Yeah.
in my own practice, I ask questions oftentimes, why do you want that? Why? We dig
mm,
sometimes 4 or 5 levels down to get to the core of what's going on, so that, the surface stuff that people typically come in, I guess you see it in your practice, they come in and they give you the surface stuff. By day 4 or 5, you realize that that's just the face of it all, but it's a
Listen,
lot deeper than
that's
that.
10 minutes for me. In the first 10, 15 minutes, I'm like, all right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, if you see it in the first 15 minutes, what's your I don't know, either your go-to question or what's your approach in kind of identifying it and calling that thing a thing?
Well, I've been doing this for 20 years. So I've spoken to have had a lot of conversations, but mostly it's like I can tell when people are telling me their script. It's the story that they told themselves. Like we all
Mm,
tell stories. We live in stories. You have a story. I have a story. I'm telling a story as I'm talking to you, and you're telling a story as you're asking me questions, right? And so we're all living stories, and we can't help but do that. That's just what we do. So when people come into my office, they tell their story, and I can tell when it's the thing. This is how I am. This is how I grew up. This is what I normally do. And this is what we've always done. And this is what I like. And this is what I don't like. It's a story. And if I know that I can tell that it's just a thing, this is who I am. This is what I do. This is my behavior. And when they start doing that, I'm like, okay. Okay. Yeah.
You know what you say? Okay.
You know,
As I was just going to say that Curtis is in our listening lounge, and Curtis said digging is not always easy, and that is sure enough the truth.
It's not. And you do have to have grace and patience, even with yourself, because some people are really tired of being that way. They really do want their relationships to work. They want their spouses to be happy and content. They want their kids to be engaged, and they want a close relationship with their children. They do want that. So yeah, digging, it does take some time. I don't just start, I just don't hit the ground running, right? So I do know that most of us are very fragile people, and on the inside of us, we're easily broken and easily, misunderstood sometimes, and we just want to be heard and loved. Really, all of us just really want to be loved and connected with. We want connections, and so yeah, it takes some time to get to those places. Absolutely.
One of the big things that shows up a lot with folks is the feeling of just not being enough, not being good enough, not having enough, and this limiting belief and this false premise gets in the way of oftentimes relationships. How do we, by way of action and communication, verbal and nonverbal, how do we, one, fill the need of your partner where not good enough exists?
Well, one, the ground is level at the cross. No one's enough.
Amen.
No one's enough. We're all filled with things that are wrong. And I think grace and acceptance and getting to know the person in their inconsistencies. These are my weaknesses. These are the things I struggle with. This is how hard it is for me. That's vulnerability. But one, understanding that we all have inconsistencies. The other is really listen to your own, your own messages that you're telling yourself. Do is enough the quota? Is that's the expectation, right? And so enough of what? What does enough mean? What does enough look like? Right? Is it a certain amount of successes? Is it a certain amount of degrees? Is it a certain amount of money? What are those guidelines? And who told you that? When did that become the thing? And if that's not the thing, then you and your wife can establish what the thing is. Right? You can reimagine some things. You can redefine what success is and what enough is. You can do that within a relationship. And it's no one else's business. You don't have to walk away telling people that we decided that this is this and that's that. That's no one's business. That's between you and your person. Right? So it's something that you can work out with each other and redefine it, but also understand that those are messages that you learned growing up. If you were never good enough.
Yeah. Stacey,
right?
If you allow me, it's a two-part question. I was leading you into this second part, and that is, how do you then shift identity? Now, again, your 20-year-old self can't serve you at 40. So how do you make that shift in a relationship, especially at midlife?
You have to do it as it relates to how you think. It cannot be how you feel, right? Feelings are real, right? But they are a result of what you think. So you think, you feel, and you behave, right? So you have to change your thinking. You have to rewire your brain, which means it may feel uncomfortable to think that I'm enough. It may feel uncomfortable to go for that job. It may be uncomfortable to do this. But I have to think differently to teach my body differently. We are really just walking around, just responding to our bodies, right? Our bodies learned a certain thing, a certain way. And whatever comfort is, comfort could be abuse. Comfort could be, dismissing. Comfort could be shutting down. That doesn't mean it's healthy because you're feeling that way, right? But we have to really change our thinking. And that means talking to ourselves. Sometimes you have to say, oh, that's my dad talking. That's not me. What is my decision about myself, right? Oh, that's my mom. ooh, that's that coach I had, or that's that teacher I had, or that's that pastor I had, that's somebody in my life, and that wasn't right. They shouldn't have said that to me. They shouldn't have done that to me. What do I think about that? I'm repeating what they said. And even back then, I didn't like it.
Right.
So
Right.
what is something I know about myself that's true? What have I been told by the people that love me? Yeah.
And what does God say about me, right?
Say about me, yes.
So before we move on, we want to get Curtis's question in here, which is, where do you think fragility comes from within our psyche?
It's just really big. It comes from, one, how your brains were formed. It always goes back to how you were formed and grew up, really. Right? Some of us weren't allowed to be assertive. Some of us weren't allowed to be even weak, or what we call fragile. We really weren't allowed to be that way. So however you were formed in whatever environment, you learned it through this emotional response. When babies learn, I used to be a child protective service worker. I used to go in homes of kids who were abused, and kids who were never picked up learn not to cry for anything, right? Flat affect. There was no facial expression. They didn't laugh. They didn't cry, because they knew if I did any of that, my needs weren't going to get met. Right. So most of us don't have that extreme of an experience, but some of us did not have any responses to those immediate needs of, I'm hurting, or what you said hurt my feelings, or I don't like what you did to me, or you said it was my fault and I know it was my fault, and I'm trying to tell you I didn't do it and you won't believe me. We don't have anything to go by. So we take those experiences, and then that's how it all happens. Right. Nothing to challenge that. So we learn that. And so we go through life like that. It's just through experiences and through relationships with other people.
This is a master class. Yes, sir.
That's right. We should have positioned it as a master class, right, Coach Wayne?
Yes, ma'am.
So good. So good. I think what we want to make sure we do is give our listeners maybe some practical tools that you feel like they can take advantage of or engage even this week, right? What's one or two things that they can do this week that will help them move forward in this area of communication with self and communication with their loved ones?
The first thing I can say is what we call mindfulness. It's just sitting still and getting to know yourself, right? Calming yourself down, notice your breathing, go through your senses. What do I feel? What do I see? What do I smell? And just take notice of where your body is in that moment. And just take some time to start knowing how your body feels. Sometimes, I walk around and something hurts and it just hurts. My sock is wrong, it's twisted in my shoe, and I just walk around all day and mad that it hurts, but not doing anything about it, right? So, sometimes I just have to stop, just, switch your sock, Shundria, so you'll feel better. Just take the time to switch the sock, right? So, and some of us we don't take the time to just stop and figure out what's bothering us or what we feel. So I would say mindfulness. Just take some time in the day just to sit still in some quiet and just ask yourself how I feel, what I'm carrying, what I'm sad about, what I'm happy about, what I'm excited about, what I'm anxious about, and just be mindful. Just breathe through it. So you just kind of get to know where you are. And I say ground, like get to a place where you make a decision that I'm okay right now.
The world is grounded.
Yes, to say I am okay. Yeah.
Shundria, when we talk about practical stuff, there is a little bit of a foggy demarcation when it comes to couples and self-care.
Yes.
Self-care and couples. Can you give some practical nuggets around that? Because sometimes, we get in each other's way, or we feel that one is being selfish when one takes time out for self-care.
Yeah, within the realms of not being selfish, there is this anxious attachment, right? I have to be okay with what you do in order for what you're doing to be okay, right? So some of us feel anxious when our significant other goes out or enjoys a time without us, and maybe find a different hobby that doesn't include us. That's an anxious attachment. But what we don't understand is if that person feels fully themselves, then they can live fully with us. right? So if they're fully themselves and they can fully love and laugh and have a great time, then there's safety in that. And there's this wholeness about ourselves that we can just be fully ourselves in our spaces. If we can't do that, then that intimacy and vulnerability, that will never happen. So just allowing people to be their full selves, right? And a part of that is practicing just kind of how to communicate better, active listening. Some people talk to listen, right? And some people listen to talk, right? So we're supposed to be, right? So we don't listen just to kind of know what's going on. We listen for what we're going to rebuttal or what we're going to fight about. Or that's not true, right? So we just listen to say what we want to say. We're not listening to actually get an understanding from the other person. So active listening is saying, okay, why do they feel that way? She looks sad, or he looks frustrated, or he looks disappointed. Why does he feel that way? Right? So active listening is an important part of being connected and being your full self in a relationship.
Stace, what you got to say? We're almost at the space where we're going to say goodbye, but I wish we could keep this going for a long time this evening, Stacey.
Yeah, I think one more kind of practical question before we sign off. What either benchmarks or behaviors or triggers might there be that couples experience that should cause someone to say, maybe we need counseling?
Withdrawal of affection, or silence, a withdrawal of themselves from you, or constant bickering. You never can get to the place, right? Or if you feel constantly misunderstood, or and you don't have to wait for your spouse to go. You can come by yourself. You don't have to wait. You don't have to go as a couple. Most people are kind of hesitant to go to counseling. And I always say, when people come in, hey, this is your counseling session. I'm not here to do anything but hear you and help you get to where you want to go, right? So once they know it's really just a conversation, and now therefore there is no condemnation to those in Christ who are in Christ Jesus, right? So you come understanding that I'm not here to tell you what's wrong with you. I'm here to help you identify some things that we can work on so we can improve this relationship that you want so badly, that you want your house to be healthy and whole and complete and peaceful. I can help you get there. So mainly it's just, making sure that you're open to get help.
Hey, Shundria Riddick, you are massive in terms of this information. You bring it to the people, and that's a beautiful thing. What are you working on? Any projects? How do folks find you? Leave us something where we can have more of you.
Yes, you can look me up at Instagram. I'm at Shundria Riddick everywhere. And right now I'm just doing a lot of speaking, a lot of podcasting. So I do a lot of speaking around the country and around the Metroplex, and podcasts just like this. So I'm doing that. I do have a book, Married for 5 Minutes, I wrote a while ago. Me and a counterpart, Michelle Stimpson, a best-selling author, Michelle Stimpson. If y'all know Boaz Brown, she's the author of Boaz Brown. We wrote Married for 5 Minutes together, and that's available on Amazon. So yeah, a lot of writing and speaking and things like that. So loving the Lord, following him. That's what I'm doing.
Love it.
I love it. Love it, love it, love it. I cannot begin to say how grateful we are for your yes, for the beautiful gift of your presence, and for your generosity in sharing your expertise coupled with the hope of Christ. This has been a joy, just a true joy. And before we're going to ask you to hang out as we sign off, but I want to make sure that my fellow partner, co-host, has anything to say.
Listen,
hey, Sharon. Go ahead.
I want to thank folks for joining in tonight, because this is a lot of gem, and especially in our community, the importance of families first. Then we have to make sure that despite the narrative that we're hearing, that we go against that and keep family as a focus. You know, with better families, we have better communities, better society, we have a better world.
Amen. Yeah. And I just say thank y'all. It really is an honor. And I don't say that. I don't take that lightly when I'm invited onto someone else's platform, because I know you care about your people. You care about who you take care of. And I know they hold space for y'all. So thank you for allowing me in such an intimate space and a valuable space. I just want to say thank you for trusting me in on your platform. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. We want to thank Sharon for joining us this evening, and Dominique for joining us this evening, who thanks you for your wisdom. Sharon says she loves this, and we appreciate y'all being here for this episode of Midlife Revolution Unleashed.
Stacey,
and don't leave us, Sister Shundria.
Okay.
Stacey, we got Dr. Richard Cross, who's been here from the get-go,
Oh,
and
thanks,
Dia,
Dr. Richard.
and of course Curtis. And I've not checked everybody else that's coming through and all of the handles that we had out there today. But hey, folks, you are listening to an episode of Midlife Revolution Unleashed. Tonight we spoke with the one and only Shundria, and listen, it was powerful. Love under pressure, communication tools for midlife relationships. Stacey, how can the folk catch some of your good coaching?
Oh, well, they indeed know how to reach me. I can be reached everywhere at thestacymlewis.com. The Stacey M. Lewis, y'all find me. Y'all know how to reach me. And we'll make sure that Shundria's information is in the show notes, along with Coach Wayne and I. Coach Wayne, what you got to say to the people?
Hey, until next time, I'll see you at the top.
I'm cheering y'all on. Thanks for tuning in to Midlife Revolution Unleashed. We're grateful you're part of this journey.
If you love this episode, share it, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss another episode.
I'm Coach Stacey, and I'm cheering you on.
And I'm Coach Wayne, and I'll see you at the top.